In large for now, U.S. astronauts must still travel to Kazakhstan and ride aboard a Russian Soyuz rocket to reach space. Last year offered a mixed bag for spaceflight aficionados. The highs were very high, with SpaceX flying, landing, and reflying rockets at an unprecedented rate while finally beginning to deliver on its considerable promise. But the lows were pronounced, too, with the loss of the Cassini spacecraft in the outer solar system and NASA's continued lack for nearly a year of an administrator. There were also delays upon delays. The ultra-expensive James Webb Space Telescope saw its launch date slip from 2018 into sometime in 2019. NASA's Space Launch System rocket saw its maiden launch slip from late 2018 into 2019 and then again into 2020. The Falcon Heavy also moved to the right on the calendar, from November, then December, and finally into early 2018. But all of those delays mean that the last couple of years of the 2010s should feature a lot of spaceflight action, and a good chunk of that will occur in the next 12 months. Looking ahead at what is to come, here are the key spaceflight milestones we're most eager to see in 2018, grouped by the approximate quarter of the year in which they might happen. 1Q Falcon Heavy flies after years of waiting. The Falcon Heavy is finally ready to fly. The first projections for the Falcon Heavy pegged its maiden launch date about half a decade ago, and for the longest time it was something always talked about but never seen. But now, we know the rocket is real. The SpaceX Heavy Lift booster has been spotted towering alongside Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Already, SpaceX has tested the rocket's transporter, and the company should perform a static fire of the Falcon Heavy's 27 engines within the next week or so. A launch could come sometime this month. This year, finally, the Falcon Heavy rocket should fly. The launch could come as early as January. The rocket has a core stage and two side-mounted boosters. The Falcon Heavy will be twice as powerful as any rocket in current service. The first launch is a test flight, so it will carry a whimsical payload. Here, we see Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster. Yes, it's really going to be shot out toward Mars. And it will be playing David Bowie. Some have said this is shameless cross-promotion of Musk's Tesla brand. Wed suggests that since he paid for the rocket, and has a history of having fun with maiden launches of vehicles, Musk is entitled to launch whatever the heck he wants. Although this is just a test flight, with a whimsical payload of Elon Musk's chariot Tesla Roadster bound for an elongated orbit around Mars, the flight of the Falcon Heavy nonetheless represents a landmark moment in the U.S. spaceflight industry. It will mark the first time a U.S. company has developed a heavy-lift rocket with largely its own financing. True, SpaceX leveraged some NASA funding to build the Falcon 9 rocket. But it has developed the core stage and integrated two Falcon 9 boosters to create the Heavy rocket with its own resources. This is a truly private rocket. In as few as 2 or 3 years, Blue Origin should complete development of its own heavy-lift rocket, New Glenn, as well. Successful flights of both would signal that the U.S. rocket industry can develop large, reusable rockets without large infusions of government money. This will likely raise further questions about why NASA, at the cost of about $2 billion annually to taxpayers, is independently developing its own heavy-lift rocket, the Space Launch System, to compete with these private efforts. 1Q4Q Small satellite launches. This could be the year of small satellite launches. The New Zealand-based Rocket Lab has already flown its Electron booster into space once, and the company plans a second test flight, still testing, early in 2018. If this mission is successful, the company could begin flying small satellites weighing about 150 kilograms into space during the first half of this year. Other companies are getting closer to spaceflight, too. Virgin Orbit says it will be ready to launch rockets carrying small satellites from its Cosmic Girl aircraft during the first half of this year. This means that after years of waiting, small satellite customers could have not one, but two choices for dedicated rides into space in 2018. Then there's Vector Space Systems, which spent 2017 launching prototypes of its Vector launch vehicle. The company has also said it is on track for orbital launches in 2018, but Vector appears to be behind Rocket Lab and Virgin at this point. Other small satellite launches, such as Strata Launch Systems, Interorbital Systems, and PLD Space, are also working toward launches by the end of this decade. 1Q-2Q Block 5 booster. The Falcon Heavy launch will grab the headlines this year for SpaceX, but in terms of its long-term future, the successful debut of the company's upgraded Falcon 9 rocket will probably be more consequential. This final version of the Falcon 9 rocket is called the Block 5 version. SpaceX has begun to redefine the aerospace industry with its reusable Falcon 9 rocket, which has now returned safely to Earth 20 times. Nevertheless, it is not entirely revolutionary to return a booster, spend several months checking and rechecking every component, and then flying the same rocket a second time. The real revolution in spaceflight will come through rapid, low-cost reusability that truly cuts the cost of access to space. That is what the Block 5 variant of the Falcon 9 rocket will bring, SpaceX founder Elon Musk has said. Each of these rockets, optimized for landing with a minimum of impact on the booster, could be able to fly 10 or potentially many more times while being turned around for reuse within weeks, if not days. If the Block 5 version is a success, there can be little question that SpaceX will conquer much of the global launch market. But first, it must fly. The Crew Dragon spacecraft will also launch on the Block 5 booster, and NASA has said it wants multiple flights of the rocket before astronauts are cleared to fly on top of it. Therefore, the sooner the Block 5 variant flies, the sooner crew flights can begin. 2Q Light Sail 2. One of the most intriguing missions of this year will come with the launch of the Planetary Society's Light Sail 2 mission. The spacecraft is booked as a secondary payload on what will probably be the third flight of the Falcon Heavy rocket, currently scheduled for no earlier than June 2018. The Light Sail 2 mission should fly sometime in the middle of 2018. The crowd-funded project will attempt to make solar sail-powered flight in Earth orbit. Once in space, the 61 cm long spacecraft will separate from the upper stage of the Falcon Heavy rocket and undergo a series of maneuvers to deploy a light sail made of mylar that will spread out to encompass an area of 32 square meters. After the light sail has deployed, the spacecraft will attempt to use the constant pressure from solar particles to raise itself to higher orbits around the Earth, perhaps by as much as 1 kilometer per day. If this test is successful, solar sail technology could be deployed on future missions as low-cost, propellant-free propulsion to explore planets and moons in our solar system. Page 2. Later this year, China plans to attempt something no space agency has done before: land on the far side of the moon. This involves two separate missions, the first of which is a relay spacecraft that will be launched to the Moon Earth L2 point and facilitate communications between the Moon's surface and Earth. This is presently scheduled to launch by before June. Then, in November or December, China plans to launch a lander and rover modeled after the Change 3 lander and U-2 rover successee sent to the Moon in 2013. The mission is expected to land inside the South Pole Aitken Basin, a large crater that may contain material from the lunar mantle, and provide important clues about how the Moon formed. No probes or Apollo missions ever landed on the far side of the Moon, largely due to the communications issues with Earth. It is therefore a mission that will be watched closely by U.S. scientists who are eager to learn more about this largely unexplored area of Earth's companion. To that end, the mission also represents a test of China's willingness to share scientific data from its space exploration program. 2Q-4Q Launching to Mars. NASA plans to finally launch the InSight mission to Mars on May 5, and the agency hopes this lander can deliver new information about the interior of the red planet. After launch, the spacecraft is set to land on Mars on November 26, where scientists intend it to operate for a minimum of 2 years. This is what the Mars InSight lander is supposed to do on Mars. The lander carries a probe designed to hammer itself to a depth of about 5 meters into the ground and offer a better view of the geological history of Mars, particularly about its interior structure and the forces that shaped the formation of rocky planets. This launch date will come more than 2 years after InSight's original launch date, because engineers discovered problems with the spacecraft's original seismometer system. 3Q Arriving at an asteroid. After a 2-year cruise through space, in August NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft will begin its final approach to the asteroid Bennu. Starting from a distance of about 2 million kilometers away from the asteroid, which is about only half kilometer in diameter, the spacecraft will use an array of small rocket thrusters to match the velocity of Bennu in its orbit around the Sun. An artist's impression of OSIRIS-REx extending its sampling arm toward the asteroid Bennu. Tucked into a shipping container, NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft is unloaded from an Air Force C-17 cargo aircraft at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The spacecraft traveled from Lockheed Martin's facility near Denver to begin processing for its September 8, 2016, launch. The shipping container holding NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft is prepared for transport from the shuttle landing facility to the Payload Hazardous Servicing Facility at Kennedy Space Center. Inside the Payload Hazardous Servicing Facility at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, a technician installs thermal blankets around the spacecraft. Technicians and engineers cycle the sample return capsule door. Engineers install a solar array panel. OSIRIS-REx will try to retrieve several hundred grams of the asteroid Bennu. It will take 2 years to reach Bennu, and the spacecraft will orbit its target for nearly 2 more years before going for a sample. The spacecraft is then due to return the sample to Earth in 2023. Wait, don't launch it yet at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. A crane lifts a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket, first stage booster, placing it in position at Space Launch Complex 41. The rocket is the 411 variant of the Atlas V, with a 4-meter payload fairing, Centaur upper stage, and one strap-on solid booster. The spacecraft weighs about 1.5 tons. 2 months later, in October, the spacecraft will begin a year-long survey of Bennu to look for plumes or any natural satellites, as well as to characterize the surface of the asteroid. As OSIRIS-REx maps the asteroid at higher resolutions, scientists will begin to choose a site from which they hope to sample the asteroid in 2020 before eventually returning the asteroid materials to Earth. 3Q-4Q commercial crew. Is this finally the year for SpaceX and Boeing? Originally, NASA had hoped that these two companies could complete development of rockets and spacecraft to carry astronauts to the International Space Station by the end of 2015. But Congress underfunded the Commercial Crew program, and the schedule slipped to 2017. Now that year has come and gone, too. Officially, both companies say they are on track for crewed launches this year. Boeing plans an uncrewed flight test of its Starliner vehicle in August, with an initial flight carrying astronauts in November. SpaceX has said it will make a test flight of its Crew Dragon vehicle in April, with a crewed mission in August. However, there are good reasons to be skeptical about those dates. Sources have told us that both companies have plenty of work to do to get ready for human test flights. Moreover, NASA has yet to announce specific Tupperson crews for each of those human test flights, and such assignments are likely to be made at least a year before the flights themselves occur. There are 4 commercial crew astronauts: Robert Behnken, Doug Hurley, Sunita Williams, and Eric Boe. And finally, NASA has moved to begin formally acquiring Soyuz seats to launch its astronauts in 2019. As a best guess, what we can probably hope for are uncrewed test flights of Starliner and Crew Dragon in 2018. Any humans launching into orbit this year probably will do so from Kazakh or Chinese soil, aboard Soyuz and Long March rockets. We'd love to be proven wrong on this. 4QSLS Green Run prep. Although its maiden launch date continues to slide to the right, the space agency and its prime contractors continue to make progress in bringing the massive Space Launch System rocket through its development process. Until this year, we have only seen individual RS-25 engine tests, but that could change later in 2018. The agency has been working to modify a large test stand, originally built in the 1960s, to test the massive first stage of the Saturn V rocket at Stennis Space Center in southern Mississippi. Later this year it will also mate 4 of the RS-25 engines to the SLS core stage for what is known as a Green Run test. This will be a big, fiery deal, marking both the first time the core stage's liquid hydrogen and oxygen tanks have been Y-fueled and the first hot firing of 4 engines combined. During the 8-minute test, the rocket engines will fire in a way that mimics their performance during launch and ascent to orbit. NASA has not set a formal date for the Green Run test yet, but as the first SLS launch has been delayed into mid-2020, this Green Run test has also slipped to the right. While we won't see the test itself in 2018, we should see the Y-assembled core stage and engines shipped from Marshall Space Flight Center to Stennis in preparation for a test in early 2019. It will provide a taste of what the Y-assembled SLS will look like. 4Q suborbital space race. It seems as though, for most of this decade, the first suborbital space tourism flights have been 18 to 24 months away. But finally, we may be within a year or less of seeing actual rockets take actual spacecraft with people on board on actual flights into space. Probably. Maybe. There have been some positive signs. In December, Blue Origin launched an upgraded version of its New Shepard booster and capsule, and everything went pretty well. The successful launch kept the company on track for launches of test passengers before the end of 2018. There are no crew on board the autonomous New Shepard spacecraft, just 6 seats for passengers. If this schedule holds, Blue Origin should begin tourism flights in early 2019, although it has yet to begin selling tickets or even to announce a price for the 10-minute ride to space. Meanwhile, Virgin Galactic says that it is also making progress in getting its VSS Unity spacecraft into space. In 2017, the company performed 6 guide tests of the spacecraft after it was released by the VMS Eve airplane at altitudes up to about 40,000 feet. The next critical step for Virgin Galactic is to conduct power test flights of the spacecraft that will take it to higher altitudes. Although Virgin Galactic does not expect to take passengers into space this year, it does anticipate making multiple flights into space in 2018 with crew on board. This would count as a substantial win for a company that has been working for more than a decade to bring its suborbital vehicle into space. For New Horizons flyby, this is the last item on the list, but if we were to rank these events in the order of likelihood, the New Horizons spacecraft flyby of 2014 MU-69 would be at the top of the heap. If New Horizons doesn't fly within a few thousand kilometers of the Kuiper Belt object at the end of this year, something will have gone very wrong. We're talking aliens invade the solar system and shoot down or trust our little spacecraft wrong. After the vehicle passed Pluto in 2015, NASA extended New Horizons' mission to use its remaining fuel for a flyby of an object in the Kuiper Belt at the edge of the solar system. Not much is known about these distant rocks and never-before-visited dwarf planets, but MU-69 seems intriguing. In July 2017, the 30 km-long object occulted a star, and telescopes observed its tiny shadow passing across the star. From this limited data, astronomers now believe the object is probably shaped like a skinny football and may in fact be a binary system rather than a single rock. New Horizons high-resolution farewell to Pluto. Although the flyby itself will occur at 12:33 MET on January 1, 2019, scientists should have good data and photos of the object beginning a few days before this. Whatever this object is like, we can be certain that planetary scientists will be partying on New Year's Eve and early in 2019 like it's 1999.